Why is Trump suddenly obsessed with Africa? What's driving this new interest from a man who once labeled African nations with less-than-flattering names? Here's a shocker for you. Africa is no longer just a charity case in the eyes of Washington. It's the prize everyone's scrambling for. And, as Professor PLO Lumumba said, we're about to witness the next chapter in the global tug-of-war. Imagine this. America, a lion that has ruled the global savannah for decades, suddenly realizes it's surrounded by rising predators. China, Russia, and even Turkey. The lion's territory is shrinking. Its roar is no longer feared the way it once was. So, what does it do? It lunges straight for the juiciest, most resource-rich region left: Africa. But here's where it gets interesting. Trump, the master of shock and awe, might just be the lion's last hope to reclaim its fading empire. According to Lumumba, a Trump comeback could see America doubling down on Africa like never before. Not with diplomacy and aid packages, but with a raw, ruthless strategy that could reshape the continent's future. But what will he do to gain back Africa? Will colonialism make a return? Let's find out. You're probably thinking, Trump? Africa? What's the connection here? Well, let's break it down. Trump isn't exactly known for his soft spot for foreign aid or international partnerships. Yet, there's a sense of urgency this time. According to Lumumba, what's happening is nothing short of a desperate gamble. With China's Belt and Road Initiative quietly taking over Africa's infrastructure and Russia making military alliances in the Sahel, the US finds itself outmaneuvered at every turn. Trump sees this and understands one thing clearly. If America doesn't get its act together, it's game over. But here's the thing. Trump's approach to Africa won't be about handshakes and smiles. No, it's about power, control, and leverage. As Lumumba puts it, the law of the jungle is still alive and well. If Trump takes office again, we're looking at a hard pivot toward Africa, driven not by goodwill, but by sheer necessity.
The world, it is hegemon militarily, it is a strong nation, economically is a strong nation, and the reality of the world is that the law of the jungle is still alive and well, is survival of the fittest, the dying of the least suitable, and in truth, power still springs from the barrel of the gun.
Look around, and you'll notice it's not just the US vying for Africa's attention. The Chinese are building railways, ports, and entire cities. The Russians are digging deep into mineral-rich regions, sending mercenaries to secure their interests. Meanwhile, Turkey and the Emirates are slowly but surely expanding their foothold. Africa has become the battleground of a new Cold War. Only this time, it's not just two superpowers at play. It's a geopolitical free-for-all. Trump, however, isn't one to play by the old rules. Lumumba believes that Trump's hardball tactics could shift the game dramatically. Unlike the more measured Democrats who preach about partnerships and development, Trump's strategy is simple: dominate or get out. His potential presidency could mean a renewed push to secure American bases, extract minerals, and secure Africa's strategic routes before China or Russia can cement their influence. Think of the last few years. The US watched as China built roads, ports, and bridges across Africa without firing a single shot. Russia, under the radar, positioned itself as a security partner, especially in unstable regions like the Sahel. And let's not even get started on Turkey's soft power moves in Somalia and Sudan. Professor Lumumba lays it bare. The US is waking up to the realization that it's being outplayed. Trump's possible return to power, Lumumba argues, is America's last-ditch effort to reclaim its dominance. He's the kind of leader who will push the envelope, break the rules, and, if necessary, bully Africa into submission. It's no longer about democracy, it's about survival. Now here's a plot twist that will keep you up at night. Trump's not just coming for Africa to counter China. He might be doing it to cozy up to an old friend, Vladimir Putin. Yes, the same Putin whose troops are creeping ever closer into African territories. According to Lumumba, Trump's bizarre rapport with the Russian leader could translate into some sort of twisted partnership on the continent. Think about it. Trump ended the Ukraine conflict by cutting a deal with Putin, and suddenly, they're both eyeing Africa as their next prize. Is Africa ready for this? Because let's face it, if Trump gets his way, the continent could be facing a geopolitical storm like it's never seen before. But here's the kicker. Africa isn't just sitting back and watching. There are signs that some nations are starting to see through the fog, realizing that they don't have to be pawns in someone else's game. But can they resist the pressure when Trump comes knocking? And if they can, what does that mean for the future of the continent? Look, we need to face a harsh reality. Africa's biggest Achilles heel is its lack of unity. Think about it. Imagine if Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, and Egypt came together with a unified agenda. The West would be sweating bullets. But instead, what do we see? Fragmentation, mistrust, and a go-it-alone mentality that has allowed foreign powers to exploit Africa's divisions for decades. Lumumba hits the nail on the head when he says, "A strong, united Africa can engage creatively, but a weak, divided Africa will always be manipulated." And he's right. The US, China, and Russia know this game inside out. Divide and conquer. It's been the strategy of empires since the dawn of time, and Africa is still falling for it.
Of the view that the United States of America is going to be very active in Africa as a reaction to China and Russia, and as a reaction to other players such as the Emiratis and the Turks.
Take the African Union, for instance. On paper, it's a powerful organization that could theoretically stand up to any global superpower. But in reality, it's often bogged down by internal squabbles and national interests that prevent any real progress. If Africa wants to change the game, it needs to unite and act as one. Imagine an African Union that had the teeth to say, "No more one-sided deals, no more exploitation. Do you want our resources? Here are our terms." Here's a reminder to please like and share the video, and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Let's zoom in on Kenya again. Because if there's one African nation that could be the linchpin in this new era, it's Kenya. Positioned strategically in East Africa, Kenya isn't just geographically vital. It's a political heavyweight in the region. The country has been walking a tightrope, balancing its relationships with both the West and the East, leveraging its position to get the best deals for its people. Here's the play. Kenya could become the broker between Africa and the West. Lumumba suggests that with the right leadership, Kenya could rally other East African nations to form a bloc that demands better terms from the US and China. Does Trump want to squeeze Africa for resources? Fine, but Africa's going to make him pay a fair price. And Kenya isn't alone in this potential. Nigeria, with its massive oil reserves, and South Africa, with its diversified economy, are other key players who could lead the charge. But it all comes down to whether these nations are willing to put their interests aside for the greater good of the continent. According to Lumumba, Africa needs to stop exporting raw materials and start exporting finished products. Why sell cobalt when you can manufacture batteries? Why export crude oil when you can refine it at home? It's a bold vision, but it's the only way Africa can stop being at the mercy of global markets. Trump is coming in hot, and if Africa isn't prepared, he's going to run circles around the continent's leaders. The man knows how to cut deals, and he's not afraid to use threats, tariffs, and sanctions to get what he wants. So how does Africa deal with someone like Trump? Simple. Learn to play his game. According to Lumumba, the key is to recognize Trump's playbook. He's a businessman at heart. If you show weakness, he'll exploit it. But if you stand your ground, negotiate hard, and show that you're willing to walk away, he'll respect you. Africa needs to be ready to call Trump's bluff, to push back when he tries to strong-arm them into unfair deals. Think about it. Trump is desperate to counter China's influence in Africa. This is Africa's leverage. If Trump wants to outdo Beijing, he's going to have to offer something better. African leaders should use this rivalry to their advantage, pitting Trump against Xi to get the best deals possible. Now, here's where Lumumba's vision gets truly radical. Africa needs to stop looking outward and start focusing inward. The continent has everything it needs to become a powerhouse on its terms. But this will require a massive shift in mindset. No more begging for aid. No more looking to the West or East for handouts. It's time to start building self-reliance. Lumumba argues that Africa needs to invest in its people, its industries, and its technology. Imagine a future where African universities are the ones producing the next wave of tech innovators, scientists, and entrepreneurs. Imagine African countries trading with each other, building regional supply chains that cut out the need for foreign intervention. One example Lumumba highlights is Rwanda. Under Paul Kagame's leadership, Rwanda has transformed from a war-torn country to a tech-savvy, self-reliant nation. It's proof that with the right leadership, Africa can stand on its own. But this can't be a one-country story. It needs to be a continental movement. So, what's the takeaway here? Africa is at a critical juncture. The superpowers are coming, but this time, Africa has the opportunity to turn the tables. Lumumba's message is clear. Africa can't afford to play the same old game anymore. It's time to rewrite the rules, to stand up and demand what's rightfully theirs. But here's the brutal truth. If Africa doesn't act now, it could miss its last chance to break free from being a pawn on the global chessboard. Trump's return, China's relentless expansion, and Russia's military moves are all signs that the clock is ticking. The question is, will Africa rise to the occasion, or will it fall back into the same patterns that have kept it down for centuries? The pressure is on. The world's superpowers are playing a dangerous game of chess on your soil, and the stakes have never been higher. The question is, can Africa flip the script? Can the continent finally leverage this global scramble to secure its future? Or will it remain a pawn in the hands of the US, China, Russia, and other opportunistic players? Professor PLO Lumumba believes Africa has a rare window of opportunity. But here's the reality check. Africa needs to stop talking and start acting. The time for grand speeches and endless summits has passed. It's time for real on-the-ground action. So, what exactly does Africa need to do to capitalize on this moment? We've all heard it 1,000 times. Africa must unite. But let's be honest. So far, it's been more talk than action. Lumumba argues that without genuine unity, Africa will continue to be played like a fiddle by the global powers. And he's right. It's one thing to call for unity in speeches and conferences, but it's another to implement policies that bind African nations together. Let's take a hard look at what's possible. Imagine an African Union that acts like a true economic and military bloc, similar to the European Union. If African countries pooled their resources, coordinated their foreign policies, and negotiated as a collective unit, the continent could become a force to be reckoned with. Think about it. Would Trump, Xi, or Putin dare to bully a united Africa? Not a chance. But unity won't happen by magic. It requires bold, decisive leadership willing to put the continent's interests above individual, national agendas. Lumumba points out that if countries like Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa lead the charge, the rest of the continent will follow. But the time to act is now. Before Trump's aggressive policies and China's Belt and Road initiatives swallow up the continent's potential. Here's a painful truth. Africa is still largely dependent on foreign aid, loans, and investments. But as Lumumba argues, this dependence is a trap. Every dollar that comes in from Washington, Beijing, or Moscow comes with strings attached. And those strings? They're nooses waiting to tighten around Africa's neck. So, what's the solution? It's time for Africa to build economic self-reliance. That means investing in industries that generate real value. Manufacturing, tech, agriculture, and renewable energy. The days of exporting raw materials and importing finished goods must come to an end. Lumumba emphasizes the need for African nations to add value to their resources, creating jobs and wealth that stay within the continent. Think about it. Why should Africa export raw lithium only to buy back expensive batteries from China? Why sell cocoa beans at dirt-cheap prices while importing overpriced chocolate bars from Europe? Lumumba's vision is clear. Africa must own its entire value chain, from raw materials to finished products. This is how you turn the tables on the global powers and start dictating terms. Here's a wild idea. Africa could become the next tech powerhouse. Yes, you heard that right. The world is so focused on Silicon Valley, Shenzhen, and Bangalore that they're missing the tech revolution quietly brewing in places like Lagos, Nairobi, and Kigali. The key here is investment, not just in tech startups, but in education, infrastructure, and digital ecosystems that support innovation. If Africa can harness the power of its young, tech-savvy population, it can leapfrog the traditional development models and create a digital economy that rivals the West and East. And here's where Trump, Putin, and Xi come in. They all want access to Africa's tech market, but Africa needs to be smart about who it lets in. Lumumba argues that African countries should use technology partnerships to their advantage, playing the superpowers against each other to secure the best deals without giving up control over their tech infrastructure. Let's get one thing straight. Africa doesn't have to choose sides in this new Cold War. The continent is in a unique position where it can forge alliances with multiple global powers, but only if it does so from a position of strength. Lumumba suggests a new approach. Africa should adopt a non-aligned strategy, similar to what many countries did during the original Cold War. But this time, it's not just about staying neutral. It's about actively leveraging the competition between the US, China, Russia, and others to secure better deals. Take the Libido Corridor project, for instance. The US wants to counter China's Belt and Road Initiative by building a railway through Angola, Zambia, and the DRC. Africa should welcome the investment, but on its terms. Lumumba argues that African countries should demand technology transfers, local job creation, and control over the projects. No more one-sided deals that leave African nations stuck with debt and poorly constructed infrastructure. And let's not forget the Gulf states, Turkey, and even India are also eager to invest in Africa. The trick is to avoid putting all the eggs in one basket. African leaders need to adopt a multi-vector foreign policy, ensuring that they're not overly dependent on any single country. This way, Africa maintains its autonomy while securing the investments it needs. Here's the brutal truth. If Africa doesn't protect its interests, no one else will. And that means beefing up its military capabilities. The US has bases all over the continent. China is establishing military outposts, and Russia's Wagner Group is already entrenched in several African conflicts. Lumumba warns that without a strong, unified African defense strategy, the continent will remain vulnerable to external manipulation. Imagine an African military alliance, an African version of NATO, where countries pool resources to protect their borders and strategic interests. This isn't about waging wars, it's about safeguarding sovereignty. But let's not kid ourselves. Building a Pan-African military force is easier said than done. It requires trust, coordination, and substantial investments in defense technology. But if African nations can pull it off, they would no longer have to rely on foreign mercenaries or military bases for security. It's about sending a message to the Trumps, Xis, and Putins of the world. Africa can defend itself. All right, let's wrap this up. The world is changing fast, and Africa stands at a crossroads. The superpowers are coming. Some with smiles, others with threats. But make no mistake, they're all here for their interests. Lumumba's message is crystal clear. Africa can either rise to the occasion or continue being a pawn in the games of others. But here's the thing, time is running out. The decisions made in the next few years will shape the continent's future for decades to come. It's time for Africa to unite, leverage its resources, invest in its people, and play the geopolitical game on its terms. Because if Africa doesn't, the world's powers will be more than happy to make those decisions for them. So here's the question. Will Africa take control of its destiny, or will it let the likes of Trump, Xi, and Putin decide its future? Do you think Trump's return will harm Africa? Let us know in the comments section. Can Africa protect itself? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.